Hello.
Welcome to Detention, everybody, our weekly interview show here at the Endurance School, where we talk to athletes, coaches, people in the endurance industry, and each other, trying to dispel the various mysteries about endurance mastery. I'm Chris Bagg,
And I'm Molly Balf.
and this week we are talking about how to plan your endurance season. Planning is always important, but especially as we move into the 2021 race season. Our previous year goals are colliding with our future year goals due to the rollover of 2020 events, creating a perfect environment for overtraining, injury, missed goals, and burnout. Tonight, we help you anticipate those issues and plan for a great 2020. Molly, I'm super excited about this talk.
I'm also super excited about this talk. I'm very pumped to be here. And I'm pumped to see the folks that we already have. Jenny G, I've been wondering how you're doing. I don't think I've seen you in a minute. We have Jonathan here. We've got Kat. Hey, Catherine. Kirby. Yay.
Thank you guys all for being here and saying hey. Amy, thanks for being in chat. Super appreciated.
Hello. I did not see Amy, but I know she's there. She's always there. It's great to see you guys. And before we get started, I do want to get out there with a caveat that we did not base this on any one of our athletes. Chris and I have both been trying to figure out what our goals are for the coming year, and we've been talking to our athletes about what their goals are for the coming year. And we've definitely been seeing the conflict of goals versus ambitions versus the fact that like we have not been racing all year. And it's definitely something that we've noticed amongst ourselves and amongst our athletes. So if you're feeling like we're calling you out, don't worry. We're calling all of ourselves out, everyone out.
Right. We are all, we all share some identities with the various athletes that we will be talking about today.
That's right.
So before we get started, I want all of you guys to grab a piece of paper or a journal or whatever it is that you write with, and something, pen, pencil, marker, Sharpie, whatever. But tonight is going to be an interactive event where Molly and I are going to be asking you to jot some things down. So go ahead, grab something to write with. You're all endurance school pupils, so we know that you've got something close at hand that maybe you use in morning routine.
It's going to be like the best morning routine episode ever. That's right, Nick. You do need quill and ink. That's very important.
That is right up our alley.
That's right.
So, of course, this being the endurance school, we have some pre-steps before we actually get to the big steps. Molly, do you want to take us into our pre-topic?
Sure. Let's see. So, actually, I don't know what our pre-topic is, Chris. What do you mean?
What's our 5-year plan?
Oh, the 5-year plan. Okay.
Rather than just 2021, let's take a step back and look at everything.
Okay. All right. So, and full disclosure, right before we started broadcasting, I was doing some of the biggest technology struggling I've been doing in a very long time. I kind of thought we were past that point in endurance school life. So I'm trying to breathe through it and sip my bubbly water and get back on top of everything. So bear with me. But the thing that we wanted to start off with everyone was, as you plan out your best season ever, what is the thing that is going to like mean the most to you as you think about where this season fits into your larger triathlon career, your larger multi-sport career, or your larger training career in general? How does this year fit into the goals that you have for yourself beyond this year? So like when you think about meeting with your supervisor, so Chris, I guess that's you. Like when you think about meeting with your business partner, what are the 5-year goals that you lay out for yourself? Like, what are the things that you want to see accomplished between now and 5 years from now? And how can this year help to move you towards that?
And as promised, Molly and I are going to use some of you as examples, but we are going to do the right thing, and we're going to use ourselves for examples first. Molly, what's your sort of 5-year plan? Like, what are you hoping to accomplish in the sport in the medium to long term future?
That's a great question. I just got really excited because I saw Leslie in chat. So I think that the thing that I would really like to accomplish, a lot of you know that I have been working on my bike and my run. And I think that like one real goal that sort of combines the work that I've been doing in the two of those is to be able to run under 4 hours off the bike in an Ironman. That's my big like 5-year goal, I think, to stay healthy enough and to like train hard enough to be able to like bike at an effort that still allows me to get off and run under 4 on the marathon. That's the big 5-year hope, I think.
And how did this year contribute to that 5-year plan?
So this year, I think I've been running injury free for longer than possibly ever. I think this is the longest I've been able to consistently run and run without a whole lot of pain, as you know, and as many people I think can share some sympathy for. I have some like pretty ongoing like hip stability and glute medius strain stuff that have kept me from being able to run consistently. But I've been good about the PT, thanks in part to morning routine. And I've been consistent with run training. This is probably the first year where I will string back-to-back like strong seasons together without having like several months off, because in the past I've had grad school and I've had other stuff that gets in the way and results in too much off time, and too much like trying to regain ground, I think. So that's kind of what this year has been about, is trying to be consistent and stay strong so that I can like parlay some of the successes of this season into next season.
And speaking of next season, so that final question of our sort of triplicate, how do you see 2021 as building upon that kind of injury-free period that you've been able to string together in 2020 in service of that big 5-year goal? What's 2021? What's the next step that you're going to take next year?
Well, next year we are going to start off with a focus on my bike, which has been, I think, again, a lot of empathy probably out there for this one, but the bike is something that people get proficient at really quickly without gaining a whole lot of speed, except for some very like genetically gifted people, I think. But the bike has never been the thing that I've been strongest at. So I think that focusing this year in the early season, especially on bike strength and speed, will be something that we get into.
Nice. So all of you out there kind of got to see that little pattern there. So as you're listening to us kind of go through this ourselves, we hope that you're pulling out your journals and starting to make some of those notes. So like, what do you want to do in 5 years? How has 2021 contributed to that? What's the big step next year? You'll notice we're not even talking about events yet.
So Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about your 5-year plan? What are you thinking about for the next couple of years?
Yeah, that's a good question. You and I wrote these down this morning, and then going back to look at them like right now, they're so eclectic. Like they're definitely goals in different areas, and I think a big part of that is that I really don't want to return to triathlon until I know that I can run effectively off the bike and not have my hip and my butt kind of bother me. And so really the biggest goal is like fix that hip and glute issue so that I can ride the bike hard for more than 56 miles and actually feel like I can run. Mm-hmm. So like that's kind of the big health goal. In terms of like, what did I do this year about that? I think morning routine and physical therapy has been a real help in that direction. Seeing John Eng for some counter strain work, which has been really cool. But then like my big 5-year goals are, I would really love to qualify for wave 1 at the Birkebeiner. Not the elite wave. Let's not think about that. But the wave that goes right after the elite wave. I would love to qualify for that at some point.
For the uninitiated, what is the Birkebeiner?
The Birkebeiner is a 50-kilometer skate Nordic race in Hayward, Wisconsin. There's also a 55-kilometer classic race, but who wants to do that? I did it this year for the first time and absolutely loved it. The first time I've ever experienced my triceps cramping. And so when you do your first Birkebeiner, you have to start in wave 8, which is the beginner's wave. And this coming year, I qualified for wave 3. So I think to get into wave 1, I'm going to have to go about 25 minutes faster than I did this past year. A big part of that will be sorted out by the fact that you're dealing with less traffic the farther you are towards the front. So it's not as monumental a time goal as it seems right off the bat. And then my other big 5-year goal is I would love to win my age group at cyclocross national championships in my 40s. That's sort of my 5 to 10 year goal.
That's a rough and tumble age group.
Yeah, the 40 to 44 age group at cyclocross nationals is pretty brutal. It eases off a little bit in the 45 to 49, but not much. It's basically all the professional cyclists who retired 5 years earlier. So it's a tough field, but I've had some top 15s at cyclocross nationals in the past. So why not?
So how do you see this season fitting into those bigger goals?
I think the biggest one is doing the Birkebeiner for the first time. I think that sense of like having to go there to know there. And getting and realizing like, okay, now I know what the event is like. Because I really had no idea what I was doing to prepare for it this past year. I don't think I prepared for it badly, but I was just skiing a lot. And so now knowing like, okay, like here are the kind of things that I really need to do to prepare for it. Do some roller skiing, do a lot of double poling. Like I sort of realized that is a really big part of being successful at this. So I think just doing that race was a really big part of doing that. Mm-hmm. I also think just like through the endurance school, like a real regular commitment to like thinking about physical therapy and staying healthy. I think that was a big part of that, which had me running healthfully for the first time in a while. So that was a really big step, is to enjoy running again, feel like I could run effectively, and now just figuring out a way that I can ride without hurting myself so I can run.
So I think that for everyone who is out there and listening to this, what we hope that you're getting is not necessarily that that like we have goals that are ever evolving and sort of based off of where we are now, but that every year when we think about how we're going to approach the coming season and when we work with our athletes on how they're going to approach the coming season, it's less about what their goals are for this year than it is about what their goals are for where they want to move in the sport and in their lives. So that's kind of the place that we hope you're starting from, and that's where we're going to start off for today.
And we're going to move from the concrete to the abstract now. And we promise this is abstract. We were kind of kicking around like, what would be like a basic 5-year progression for somebody who is new to the sport, and a kind of sensible progression up through the distances, if that's something that they are into. So Molly and I are going to chat now about the mysterious athlete A, who is new to triathlon and has mostly in his or her first year of racing been focusing on short course racing, which is probably the right thing to do as you get into the sport. Molly, what are we going to do with athlete A in this very first year? Like, what's our sort of scope of work?
So first off, I think we need to humanize athlete A. Let's call him Arnold. I
Arnold.
think, yeah, Arnold is going to be our athlete A for this.
You don't
Um,
want to just like do like he or she for the entire time. You don't
I
want to.
no, I think that Arnold. I think everybody's going to come to love Arnold. I think
All
Arnold's
right,
going to be kind of an endurance school mascot.
nice.
Um,
Does Arnold have sort of like a severe jaw structure and a like a spiked crew cut?
yeah, and you'll be surprised to find Arnold is an Arnie in the pool. Shocking, I know, and
Nice.
not an unusual story. So, if this is Arnold's first year, focusing on short course racing and aiming to build some like race specific endurance, but also really aiming to build competence and familiarity with the sport, with the events, making sure that when you go to a race, you feel like you know what to expect is probably the thing that you can gain the most in that first year, and then also I think that we'll get into this a little bit later, but like as you start to build into either trying to be more competitive in short course or trying to go longer, one of the most important things that I think that athletes can do is find places in their schedule for training, because getting into the habit of finding those places for training can be really difficult for those of us who have busy lives and who may have expectations outside of the sport, of family, of jobs, of anything, like other hobbies that we do. So finding time for training that you can build and expand upon, I think, is one of the things that I hope most athletes are focusing on in that first year.
Yeah, because you see so many athletes that end up in the kind of one and done kind of
Mm-hmm.
pattern, and they're not really focusing on integrating the sport into their lives.
Yep.
They're sort of like they kind of bolt the sport onto their life for a little while, and then once they're done, it's out. And I think what you're talking about is like they make it part of your life so that all of the stuff is comes easier.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so that you're not sacrificing quite as much. If the sport feels like it's a constant sacrifice, it's going to be a lot harder to make time for and to make excuses about. So try to find those times that you don't feel like you're constantly balancing everything else.
Um, I think another thing in that first year is like really trying to figure out what it is that you love about the sport. You were
Mm-hmm.
drawn to it for some reason, like you thought it looked cool, like a friend did it, you're like, oh, I want to be part of that. But then really discovering in that first year, like what are you just like, what can you not stop thinking about in terms of the sport is a really great thing that'll keep you excited and motivated and into it
Mm-hmm.
as you kind of develop your triathlon life, which leads us into year number two, unless there's anything else you want to bring up about year number one.
No, but I do think that Kirby's right on with the what is your why? Like figure out the reason why you came to this and continue to remind yourself of it, because your shiny new bicycle will eventually fade.
Yes, it always gets dirty.
It always gets dirty.
Year number two, if you're interested in moving up to that middle distance of racing, and when we say middle distance, we're really talking about like 70.3 or half iron distance. Um, that second year is a good year to test the waters with 70.3 or middle distance race. This doesn't mean that you have to like continue that pattern of bumping up in distances, but it's not a bad idea to actually give it a shot. A 70.3 is not so long and so massive like an Ironman that like really there's a big question about like, is this even possible? It's a difficult distance for sure. There's nothing easy about it. But it's certainly a lot more approachable. And year number two, after you've kind of made the sport, integrated it into your existence, figured out why you like it, integrated the schedule, it might provide a good year to kind of take that next step up to a longer distance and just see if you like it.
I think the other thing to remember with moving on to middle distance and even in moving on to Ironman is that those gains in volume usually happen in your long rides and runs. I think that when people hear like 9 to 10 hours a week when they've been training 5 to 6, like that seems like a really big jump. But when you consider the fact that 3 hours of that probably comes from your long ride and an additional hour from your long run, like it starts to get a whole lot more approachable. The actual week to week training for Olympic distance, for half Ironman, for Ironman, if you're being consistent, most of that volume difference is going to come from your weekends, or whatever day you're doing your longer stuff in.
Yeah. Yeah, if you've been doing this sensibly so far, hopefully year number 1 was a lot of technique work. Like, sure, you're doing some speed work, you're doing some, interval stuff, you're doing a lot of base work, but you are doing lots of technique, so you're picking up the fundamentals of the sport adequately. And year number 2, yeah, you extend that long ride and that long run, but ideally, you're doing all the same things. It's 70.3 intensity is way closer to Olympic distance intensity than it is to Ironman intensity. And so the actual nature of the training doesn't change a whole lot.
Absolutely. So I think that if that is your goal, and no matter what your goal is, the next thing to ask yourself is my goal reasonable? Is my goal doable? Do I have what it takes to accomplish that goal this year? So if your goal is to complete a half Ironman, or if your goal is to go up in distance, check the cutoff times for the race that you are signed up for, and make sure that that it's within the realm of possibility. And if not, then consider doing another year where you're focusing on short course and really focusing on speed. And I can't stress enough how much I wish that more athletes would spend a couple years really getting into speed, because as you start to increase distance, it gets much harder to balance any speed work. So you're probably not going to get faster in your Ironman season because you're working on extrapolating distance.
Yeah, they actually work at cross purposes to each other. So it's it doesn't make sense to try to add distance and speed at the same time.
Right.
And that takes us right into our third year, which is if you've enjoyed the middle distance and you're I kind of think that this is fun. Maybe you have that inkling of doing an Ironman at some point. That third year, consolidate your experience at the middle distance. All right, that you can do one. Focus on speed, focus on the Olympic distance, focus on technique. It kind of goes back to where we started, and really sort of find your groove in this sport, and continue to develop before you just pile on the base and the volume necessary to jump up to the longer distance.
So Chris, at what point do you recommend that someone stop focusing on technique?
Never. Absolutely never.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not. It's been really interesting picking up roller skiing recently, because I'm really trying to come at it from the point of view of hey, you never approach things in a deliberate manner, Chris. You basically go at something until it's broken. Let's do that differently. Let's try to balance on these roller skis. Let's start with drills. Let's really focus on the basics. And I really wish that I had approached triathlon like that from the get-go. I really wish that run technique had played more of a big role at the beginning. Same thing with cycling, same thing with swimming. I grew up swimming, so the stroke is kind of what it is, but that isn't to say that you can't tweak it. So yeah, never ever stop working on technique.
Do you still work on swim technique even now?
Oh my God, it's those are my favorite workouts. They go by really quickly, because you're able to focus on something.
Yeah.
The high intensity sessions in the pool, there's nothing interesting about them. I know exactly what they feel like. I know exactly what to expect. It's just something to be gotten through. And I enjoy it, but I don't enjoy it in the same sort of exploratory way that a technique session is I'm going to do javelin drill and I'm really going to work on my breathing to the left while my right arm is entering the water.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So year 4. Year 4, I
What
think.
happens in year 4, Molly? What
I,
happens then?
I think year 4 is when you have more options open up to you. I think that in year 4, I think that is when I am super supportive and comfortable with an athlete deciding that they want to do a full Ironman, deciding that they want to get a little bit more competitive with their middle distance goals. And I don't mean competitive like winning your age group or whatever. I think that any competitive goal is one that that forces you outside of the zone that you've gotten comfortable with. So I think that is year 4 is where I feel like people know what to expect from the sport and have had enough experience with it and have strung together, hopefully, even 3 relatively solid seasons. Because I think in the first couple of years, it's not uncommon to have people who do one race and then take some time off. It's not totally uncommon for people to do that for their first decade in the sport, but I think that once you've had a couple years where you're doing this consistently, it is a lot more likely that you've built up that base of volume that will make Ironman training a lot more feasible for you and a lot more comfortable for you and enjoyable for you. So year 4 is usually where I recommend that people think about taking another step up in distance or trying to get a bit more, like trying to layer more speed and more technique into the work that they're already doing.
And this is the moment where we pause a little bit and say, hey, everybody, remember, like, your participation in triathlon is not contingent upon doing the long distance racing.
Mm-hmm.
That is that the sport tends to try to push people in that direction, and it's not a requirement. Mm-hmm. You are no less a triathlete if you don't do Ironman. Every single distance in this sport has some particular very, very difficult aspect to it. And if you've done 70.3 and you look at Ironman and you're like, no thanks, then you're sort of at this point, you're 4 years into your triathlon career where you've kind of become a lifetime athlete. And if Ironman doesn't hold interest to you, certainly don't do it, because that is just a road to burnout of like putting yourself through lots and lots of hours of training for something that actually you're not that interested in.
Absolutely. And don't let anyone shame you for not wanting to go long. I think that going long is a real sacrifice. It's something that involves a lot of time. It involves a lot of your weekend. You can absolutely finish an Ironman. Most people can finish an Ironman. Most people can finish an Ironman on significantly less training than is probably a good idea. But I think that it's still, no matter what, it's still a big sacrifice. And if your life does not have room for that, or you do not have a desire for that, you absolutely don't need to do it. And don't let the bug bite you if you're not interested.
But it really does take 3 full seasons of concerted aerobic development and the durability associated with 3 years of run training to really be able to tackle an Ironman effectively. Mm-hmm. We've seen so many athletes that try to do the thing where like their first triathlon is an Ironman. And I hate to say it, like physiologically, it's just not a good idea. You're going to spend so many of your workouts basically playing catch up. And it's just your joints and your tendons haven't gone through the development that a few years of running will really, really help insulate you from injury. Mm-hmm. So we really, really suggest people, like, if you want to do an Ironman and if you want to do it right, like, it really should be a 3-year process.
So what happens in year 5 then?
Man, if you've made it to year 5, then like that's awesome. Like, again, you have made this sport, you've made endurance like a lifetime thing for you. And you probably can do anything you want. Like, you can branch out into gravel racing, ultra running, cross-country skiing, like cyclocross, bike racing, open water swimming,
cold water swimming.
heck, like you can get into some of the like obstacle course racing. Triathletes have a real gift in that we're pretty well balanced from a physiological perspective, and there isn't too many things that you can't do, which is I think one of the great gifts of 2020 is that people have been outside of events and like are like, all right, like what are we going to make up? And those people who have been doing endurance work for consistently for a long time, they're kind of getting their pick of the litter.
Mm-hmm. Talk to Amy BT. She regularly does cool events that are outside of the norm. Talk to people who've been doing this for a while. Also, like talk to the people who've been in the endurance training world and like have done cool things that have been, you know, slightly different from the run of the mill event that we all love. There's a lot of cool and weird stuff out there. Talk to people who have seen it and heard about it and done it.
Yeah. Oh, swim run. Why didn't I put that in my
swim run?
Swim
That's
run.
right. Me and Eddie Vegas. That's right.
Okay, so we've now talked for about 30 minutes in our pre-topic. So we're now going to shift into basically speaking from this moment forward into imagining the 2021 season.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Molly, you're wrapping up your season. You've still got about a month of work before holiday half. What's going to happen? What's the first thing that's going to happen when you're done with 2020?
Nothing.
Yes.
I'm going to do 2 weeks of absolutely nothing. And I can tell you, I am ready for it. I was telling Chris yesterday, I feel like I'm just limping my way into the off season right now. Like I'm ready for a break. And like, I know it's going to be, it's going to be awesome. Like I am not going to struggle with it. I just need some solid time where like my body can recover and my brain can recover from all of the hyper intense focus. You know, like we are focused and we are dedicated. And even when we're not like checking all the boxes, it's still something that kind of weighs on us. And like, we don't want to check our training peaks because of the red that's like glaring at us. It's something that we all deal with, and giving yourself 2 weeks of slack is beautiful and awesome and necessary.
But Molly, what if I feel like it's not possible for me to take 2 weeks off of training?
Talk to your coach about it and see why you think that might be true. And if still after a conversation about like the real like physiological and psychological benefits of off season, then consider if you really can't take 2 weeks off, consider really taking some space from the sport and what role exercise and training plays in your life. A lot of us have difficult and complicated relationships with training and with exercise. And that is something that if you really feel like you can't stop doing anything at all, that's something that it's probably not a bad idea to talk to a mental health professional about. We definitely benefit from sports psychologists in this world, and you need to be able to take some space when it's healthy to take some space. And 2 weeks is not going to get rid of the hard work that you've done. In fact, you're only going to get stronger in the 2 weeks that you take. And Jonathan asks a great question: is 2 weeks enough? Jonathan, 2 weeks is like the minimum. I think 2 weeks is it's about right for most folks. I think that the absolute minimum you can get away with is probably 10 or 11 days. I think 2 weeks is usually just about right to like miss it but have healed. And I think after about a month, you start to experience some detraining and some like fitness losses that are not permanent, and you will certainly make your way back from them. But it's, if you are trying to string together a couple of solid seasons, a month is probably the maximum. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, exactly. You know, I think we want your fitness to kind of look like the stock market. Like it should mostly go up, and then right around this time of year there should be a correction. And whether that's a 10-day slide or a month-long slide, somewhere in there is going to be the sweet spot. But what we want to see is that every year you're starting at a slightly higher spot than you did last year, which is why that's one of the reasons why we're so insistent on like, want to do an Ironman? It takes 3 years to kind of build up to that chronic training load to get there. Yeah, I mean, I'm on like day 10 right now, and honestly, like, I'm not really feeling the itch. I'm really enjoying not training, and that usually says to me that if I'm not like feeling it yet, it's not time to start. You should really take a break until you are legitimately excited about the activities again, about swim, bike, run, about skiing, about whatever. You should be thinking about doing the activity rather than whatever you believe the activity is going to get you.
Absolutely. And I think VT makes a really good point that like you may feel the like you may actually really feel like you're losing fitness in that time. I always feel that in the taper week before a race. Like I'm always like, oh my God, did I remember to train for this? Like, am I still strong enough to do this? I haven't exercised like as much as I usually do for a whole week. And that's when I'm actually still training and I know that I have an event coming up that I'm resting for. So when you have 2 weeks of solid time off, you should expect your brain to get in the way to some extent, whether it is like saying that you are losing fitness or saying that you should get back sooner than you actually need to. Expect your brain likes habit and it likes consistency. So when you do take some of that away, you should expect to have at least some reaction to that. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't still do it. And all of those capillaries that you've built up over your last several years of training, they're still there. You cannot get rid of them.
Yeah. Yeah, you're on such a different time schedule than the way your brain works. Like the next time that you get a cut, like track how long it takes for your body to fix it. Like your body has to make new flesh. It has to, build stuff. And that's something that takes days and weeks, not hours. And all of the adaptations from training, when we stop training, that's when your body is like building those structures. So, try to widen the perspective a little bit, sort of the same way that we did with the 5-year plan at the top of the show.
And it helps to have that trusted friend to be like, hey, am I losing fitness? Am I not a fit person anymore? And then have that person be like, no, you are fit still. Just hearing that is helpful.
I want to take a brief digression here. Ed said that he lost a paddle at Swim Run, and I think that that's kind of like the Spanish way of describing how something falls over, which is it fell itself down, which is not usually the case when something gets knocked over. So, Ed, I want you to do some soul searching about that paddle getting lost.
To be fair, one paddle was lost, the other was hurled.
So it's a half story.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a full truth.
Anyway, thank you for indulging that digression.
Anyway, right.
Okay, we're finally at the point of talking about 2021. Molly, what's our first step?
First step is to pick your races, I think. After you've taken that time off, and hey, maybe during that time off, like dare to dream, folks. Get out there and figure out what sounds really fun to you this year, what's motivating to you this year, and then cut that list down. Like if you have like 10 things that sound awesome, pick 2. 2 is a great idea. It doesn't mean it's all you can do next year, but like 2 should be about the number that you're really focused on for your triathlon season. And that's another thing that I think is not a bad idea, especially for people who've been in the sport for a while and need a little bit of like, stimulation, a little bit of extra like attention deficit sport participation. I think that having a spring race and a fall race that are your real goals, and then maybe having a winter season where you're doing something else, whether it's cold water swimming or skiing or, some kind of different like cyclocross, some kind of different sport. I think that's totally reasonable.
Yeah, like I think that, you're going to pick 2 primary things that you're going to do next year, and then you're probably going to pick 1 or 2 secondary or tertiary things or events or foci. And we really like to suggest that those secondary goals or events really focus on a limiter. So, if you're thinking about doing some draft legal racing and triathlon, let's pick one of those secondary focus races and do some bike racing. I know for me, like I swam well in the pool and then struggled in open water during triathlon, doing a few open water events really helped me get my head around the way that those events worked. Run fitness, run speed, if that's ending up being a limiter for you, pick a 10K or a half marathon where you really, really want to get after it and really focus on run speed and run intensity. But really have those secondary foci aim at limiters in your triathlon career. If you're already a really good cyclist, like maybe you enjoy doing bike racing and that's awesome too. That's really a big part of it, but you're not really addressing a limiter in that case.
Mm-hmm. All right. So what's our next step, Chris? Once we've picked our couple of focus events. Foci.
Okay. So you're looking at 2021, you've got those focus events on your calendar. You've got some like secondary or tertiary goals kind of like speckled throughout the year. Now's the point where we are actually going to start splitting the year up into periods. And before we start doing this, brief caveat, we're going to toss around a whole bunch of nomenclature here in a second. We're going to do our best to like say the different things that they get called. But let's try to stay away from being dogmatic with it, everybody. Like, it's pretty easy to get attached to a certain set of vocabulary, but the goal here is your endurance development. So take the principles rather than the labels is what I would say. So yeah, we're gonna split the year into periods, and the first chunk happens right after you get back from your break. Molly, what are some of the names that chunk gets called?
Base, I think is probably the big one that people hear. The base training period. Chris, what does base training mean?
I think you'll also hear like foundation or preseason tossed around.
Endurance.
Those are other ones that endurance period, stuff like that.
It's all endurance.
Right. I know. So we're always working on endurance. The whole sport, whole way of being. So like during this period, I like calling it the foundation period, whatever.
I refer to it as the training to train period.
I love that because like that really actually communicates what it's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's usually like 4 to 8 weeks long. And like we really try to actually have this period not be very complicated. You should be doing more than you were doing in your break. It shouldn't be hard. On the bike, just ride it. Just go ride your bike.
Sometimes big gear.
Yeah. For the run, just go run. Like start building up that your body's ability to deal with the pounding of running. Running is really, really intense, the most intense out of the three sports. A little does go a long way. Maybe throw in some like short fartlek workouts where you're doing like 30-second to a minute of like quicker running, but nothing hard. Maybe some short hills. Molly, what does the swim look like during this period?
I mean, get back in the water for sure, but work that technique. Work on your specific limiters, the things that pop up most for you. For me, it is the balance between the right half of my body and the left half of my body. So like, I need to be doing a whole lot of like bilateral breathing and making sure that, I'm not crossing over, the little things that like pop up in my swim technique that if I like nail down early on in the season will keep me from getting injured and will make sure that I'm actually like layering speed on a solid foundation, which I think is the purpose for all three sports.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. You can't, we don't really want to think about going fast until we can do it well.
Mm-hmm.
If you're somebody who is like if you're a person who dreads the pool, I know you exist. I know that happens. Try to use this period to bump up the frequency of your swimming. A lot of the time for people who are not drawn to the pool, it's the tedium, I think, is one of the things that we hear a lot, that it's just mindless back and forth. I feel like the hamster on a wheel. instead of like 3 30-minute swims, do 4 20-minute swims.
Mm-hmm.
Like just bump up that frequency so like the habit of going to the pool is easier.
And remember that swimming is like learning a foreign language. If you don't immerse yourself in it, it's just not going to stick. If you think about like your seventh grade Spanish class that you had twice a week and how you never quite got fluent, but then after 5 days in Mexico, you can like go to the bar and like make friends. That's the same with swimming. I think it's something that you really got to jump into, quite literally.
I like that, like, we went from like middle school Spanish to like going to the bar. So this kid is like 15.
Yeah, my middle school life was super wild.
Okay, so we get through that like 4 to 8 weeks, so let's take, your example. Like, you're gonna do holiday half, mid-December.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna take a break at least until the first of the year.
Oh yeah.
So this first period is taking you to at least February 1st, maybe even March 1st.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first 2 months of the year. Where do we go from here? What's our next kind of chunk of the year?
So I think the next real phase is, people call it many things again, general preparation, base 2. So you could probably make a case for build in here at some point, although build is one of those things like tempo. That's like, what are you talking about? Like, we're always building. But yeah, so I think that at this point, it's time to think about what your limiters are. And for a lot of new athletes, limiters are endurance and durability, and in some cases, speed. But I think that speed is a limiter that comes later for people. The first thing that you have to have is the ability to complete the race. And for many new athletes, that is the ability to swim the distance safely and, get out of the water still able to ride your bike and run. Once you have that, you want to work on, you want to make sure that you have the durability and the volume to make sure that you can finish the race distance that you've selected for your year. So if you're upping your distance, a lot of this period is going to be about building volume. And then if you have been doing this for a little while and you know what your specific limiters are, then, in my case, I'll be working a lot on the bike and some on the run and hoping my swim comes together, which it should. If I just get back in the water,
right.
That'll help. That'll really help.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's a thing for you that you're like, this isn't a limiter for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to really think about it too much. You still have to swim, but like you have confidence that it's going to behave.
Right.
Yeah.
Although I do still have that voice in the back of my head that's like, maybe you don't remember how.
and that voice will always be there, right?
Right.
Like when that voice isn't there, then that's a cause to worry in a different direction.
Then you're like superhero. What else am I missing during this phase, and how long does this phase go, Chris?
So this phase is a weird one. It basically goes until you're 6 to 8 weeks out from your primary race. So Molly, you're training for Ironman Canada next year.
Yep.
So we're talking, let's say that you do take like a really robust like base or foundation period. You take full 8 weeks. It takes you to March 1st. This next period, general preparation, base 2, base, this is going to go all the way to like July 1st or July 15th.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is going to be the huge bulk of your season is this period. And the goals here, like you said, like, can we get that specific endurance for that event? And then we're working on building the engine. We're trying to make the engine as good as possible at that particular distance. Once we know that you can do the distance. And for an Ironman, for a lot of people, doing the distance is a question mark. Mm-hmm. So like, so much of that, what you're doing, like you just said, is about getting the specific volume. A bunch of different examples that you might be working on, people trying to extend their time at threshold on the bike. That's one that like you're going to be spending a lot of time doing.
I already am. It's terrible.
Yeah, you're already doing some of that. Raising your threshold pace in the swim, that's probably something a lot of people are doing. Or same thing, extending their time at threshold in the swim.
Mm-hmm.
VO2 max, try to push that on the run, on the bike. Lowering VLA max on the bike. Improving your open water technique. Really, like, there's so many things here that, like, like we just tossed out 5 or 6 examples. We could spend 20 minutes putting out examples, but
although I will also add, getting strong in this phase is a good thing to be doing as well. Making sure that you are doing the strength and doing the PT that you need to be doing, so that like in that last big push, you are strong and like ready for it.
And in terms of what the training looks like, it's this is where your training is going to be looking what has come to be called as polarized training, which is kind of putting a label on something that a lot of coaches have always done. Lots and lots of lower intensity work to really build that engine, build that sport specific endurance, make some capillaries, make more mitochondria, improve fat oxidation, like all the good stuff happens at that lower intensity. And then a little bit of like really high intensity. So VO2 max work, some threshold extension work for sure, but it's not as much of a focus as building the lower intensity engine and the higher intensity stuff. All right, Molly, take us in. What happens in the next 6 to 8 weeks before the race?
So I think in the 6 to 8 weeks before the race, it's time to get specific. It's time to think about the specific requirements of the course that you are going to be doing. And that can mean a lot of things, but what I really want people to think about in this phase is, are you riding your long rides on a course that's going to mimic or at least like get close to the race course that you're planning on racing? Are you on the equipment that you are planning to be using during the race? Are you wearing the clothes that you plan to be wearing during the race? Like, are you using the nutrition that you plan to be using during the race? How specific can you get for your distance and for your course to make sure that you are as successful as possible? If you are 6 to 8 weeks out from your Ironman, it's going to include probably 2 of your biggest weekends of Ironman training somewhere in that 6-week period. So are you putting together the big stuff that like is going to let you specifically complete that distance? That's what I think most people should really be focusing on during that time. What am I leaving out there?
Let's see. I think that resting really becomes more important during this period. That you've done your biggest weeks of the year. Sure, you're going to have some of your biggest like workouts during these periods and your biggest weekends, but like total volume, like chronic volume, probably happened back in May, June, something like that. And we're getting to the point where your body, what it really needs is it needs some breaks. So like having some periods where it's really, really easy, which can seem counterintuitive, but it's so important. Because you really need to give your body a chance to soak up the work that it's done. A lot of the time, we'll see swim volume come up during this period as bike and run volume kind of drops a bit. Like we really do want to see that happen. It's not everybody who's going to do that, but we can get something from turning up your swim volume because it's so low impact. It doesn't beat you up very much. And usually people can deal with some increased swim volume. Frequency helps, the technique gets better. And that polarized approach that we did in the big chunk of the middle, that sort of goes away. We're kind of now focused on the middle intensities. So tempo, threshold, aerobic. If you're doing Ironman, your race pace is like it's your endurance zone. So like you're going to spend lots and lots and lots of time in this period at that lower intensity.
I do also want to point out, though, for a lot of people in this period, swim volume does come up, but because our athletes tend to be fatigued, swim confidence also goes down. So fatigue shows up the most in the swim, I think, for most people. If you notice that, like, all of a sudden you've gotten way slower and you don't know why, you are probably tired. I think that in many cases, your swim pace doesn't really show up until you start to taper for a big event. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, it'll come back. Jenny, 6 to 8 weeks is kind of where this is happening. And it's during this period, just like recovery, that the ancillary stuff really becomes important. So like mental strategies, your daily nutrition, and sleep. Oh my God.
Absolutely.
As cleverer Europeans than me have said, the Tour de France is won in bed. And it's true. You really, when you're within 2 months to your big event, you're probably not going to train yourself at this point to much more improvement, but you sure can sleep yourself to some really great improvements.
And along those lines, this is not the time to be doing any body composition work. This is not the time to be restricting calories. This is the time to make sure that you are getting in the food and fuel that you need, not only to be training the way that you need to be, but also recovering the way that you need to be.
Okay, we've got some periods kind of roughed out. We've got like a little period of reintroduction or base or foundation or whatever you want to call it. We've got some general preparation, or now we call that base or second base, whatever you want to call it. We've got some specific preparation or a build period, and then your race. So once we've gotten this breaking into periods, Molly, what do we do next? Or do we do this next?
Well, then I think we taper and race, right? Is that what we do? What's the?
I was going into your next thing about breaking those periods into weeks.
Oh, sorry about that. I was like, I think we do our races. Yeah. So once you have those periods broken out, you want to make sure that you are figuring out what your weekly training looks like. And for most people, that is a week. Like that is, Mondays you swim, Tuesdays you do your quality ride, Wednesdays you do your quality run. Saturdays and Sundays tend to be long stuff, but it doesn't have to be a week. If you have a non-traditional schedule that allows you to train outside of the workday, then it's absolutely fine to, instead of have a 7-day training period, have a 10-day training period, especially if you find that you need a little bit more rest. For a lot of athletes who have already retired and have a little bit more flexibility in their day-to-day schedule, and who may have found that they benefit from more rest, this can be really useful to think about like 10-day training weeks instead of 7-day training weeks. But try to figure out what it is that you need and like what specific kinds of training. We usually say no more than 20% of that total time should be at intensity, and 20% is a pretty high percentage. So about 80% of your total volume is just going to be easy endurance.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I love that idea about not getting beholden to just the 7-day. We're sort of stuck on the 7-day cycle because of training peaks, or whatever thing you use.
And Caesar.
It's like at the 2 schools where I work, who ran the school? It wasn't the principal. It was the administrative assistant. Like the administrative assistant owned the calendar and ran the school. And that's something that I really think happens to the rest of us. Like we get stuck on this schedule because it's what we see our training peaks structured as. But this is such a great call to like experiment, like figure out what training cycle works for you. Maybe like doing intensity once every 10 days fits better. Maybe you're somebody that can do intensity every 4 days, but you're taking a really easy day and an off day in like a 6-day cycle. Like play around.
And that's another, I think that brings us to our one of our last points, hopefully, as we are just about at time, but also realize how much recovery you need and make sure that you're tailoring your training plan for that amount of recovery. A lot of people have been brought up, I think, some of the stuff in like the Triathlon Training Bible and some of the like Friel standard training, which is great. It's great stuff. But it tends to be focused at elite athletes. It tends to be focused at younger athletes. And it tends to be focused at people who have been training over the course of a lifetime. I think most athletes, and I certainly, do not benefit from 3 weeks of build followed by 1 week of rest. Most people need a week of rest earlier than that. So in general, we tend to schedule people so that they have 2 weeks of gradual build and then 1 week of rest. But find out what works for you and stick to that. It tends to be fairly consistent too. And as we've said before, bodies really like routine. So once you start to feel like you're tired and you're getting crabby and your swim pace is dropping, give yourself a couple of days and take an easy week.
And I think we are about to just be done, but please remember that everything we just talked about for an hour is basically one approach.
Mm-hmm.
And in the words of George Orwell, break any of these rules before you say something truly monstrous. And really, if you focus your attention on consistent aerobic work and technique, you don't even need to periodize your year.
Yeah.
That if you focus on those principles of doing the movements well and building and conditioning your aerobic system, you are going to get faster and faster, up to a certain point where you're going to kind of get some diminishing returns. But whatever, like that's going to be true enough for so many people. So play around and see what is going to work for you. But those are the two things that really sit underneath all of this. Man, that's like 60 minutes on the nose.
Yeah, I can't believe we had so many things to say about that. I feel like we were like, oh, we'll have like 25 minutes for questions, and then we'll end early and eat Rice Krispie treats. If you guys do have questions, though, you can always email us, info@chrisbaggcoaching.com, or we are about to launch a very cool Discord server, which is probably going to be the funnest thing that has happened in the endurance training space in maybe forever. This might be the
Ollie,
most. Yeah.
What's a Discord server?
So I'm just kind of figuring that out, but it is a place that you can chat and you can like share cool endurance training memes and ask questions and like engage in chat and like, you know, be part of the community when the endurance school is not actually live. So I think that is something that we've just created it right now. There are 2 members and it's me and Chris posting memes. So some people should come and join us because it's super fun. And you can see Chris's favorite, this is the Oregon Trail wagon falling over me, which is excellent.
Yeah.
But we are subscribed to the Endurance School, and we will send out a link to the Discord channel as soon as we figure out how to use it. But expect that in the next couple of days.
Let's see. I'm seeing if we got any questions here. Yeah. Okay. I think that is it then. Guys, thank you for coming. This is a really well-attended event. We really appreciate all you guys showing up. Thank you so much. Thank you for the cheers. That is hugely helpful. That goes into building out the endurance school grounds and faculty and all that stuff. So that really does help us continue to develop this. We've got a lot of cool stuff in the pipeline. We got Amy VT Yoga tomorrow morning. Woo. New time slot, 7:30 a.m.
Sleeping late.
Be there for that. We had a great turnout last week. We had like 8 to 10 people come in that new time slot, so maybe that's a good thing. We're back on Thursday with our usual Zwift group ride. So check out our Facebook page for that. If you've been coming to Zwift, we've probably already invited you to that event, to that meetup. And then this Saturday, our first return to endurance spin, Saturday morning, 8 a.m. We're going to also be doing it on Zwift, and we will send out some information about that. But winter endurance spin returns.
It's going to be great. It's probably going to be the highlight of your winter season. But just in general, guys, it's so great to see all these folks out here in chat. Thank you again for coming, and this has been an absolute delight. All right, Chris, you take us out while I find my OBS.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. We really appreciate it. Yeah, bring that strap or a belt to yoga in the morning. Think about your 2021 season. And here's to a happier and faster tomorrow.
Bye, guys.